Me? What do I do? Well, I'm in between jobs. Meaning? Meaning I do this and that, but my career, as it were, ended a few years ago, before it even got started. As he was a bit drunk, Guy wasn't being as secretive as he normally was, as if he had to get something off his chest. Oh dear, and your career was? Well, I worked for a short time with the CIA. There, I said it. You're joking. Nope. Really? Scout's honor, but I quit. Or rather, I was fired. Or more like it was a bit of both. I chose to get fired. Because you didn't like what you were doing? That's part of it. I was so disillusioned with the role that the agency had played in world politics, I'd been led to believe that we were the good guys trying to make the world a better place, and that was not the case at all. Finding out about the agency raising money to stage coups in other countries by selling crack didn't help. What? Well, indirectly. They sent tons of cocaine to Danilo Blandon in San Francisco, who sent it down to Freeway Rick Ross in South Central LA, who made it into crack. That's what started the crack epidemic in the US. Basically, the agency poisoned the people they were supposed to protect so they could afford to trick other people into killing each other. Plus the Guatemala United Fruit thing. Lex briefly closed his eyes and lifted a hand in a gesture that meant, yeah, that. Guy went on. But I had a very bright future there, and I was putting my morals on the back burner, so to speak. They said I was going to be the future of espionage, that I was going to change the world. And then she walked into the room, he added quietly. Lex waited while Guy watched some memory resurfacing. The change that came over the thief's face as he gazed off into nothing was like warm light. We had big plans, Guy said. All my friends and fellow spies. We were in a restaurant in Langley, Virginia, talking excitedly about what we were going to do, using code words so the people sitting around us wouldn't understand. We'd finished dinner and we were having drinks and we're talking and laughing and being proud of who we were, like the kids at the party before they go off to war. You know, on this St. Crispin's Day and all that. A merry band of brothers. And then, all my fine castles in the air just melted away because a girl walked in. Lex sat up in his chair again. Tell me. I hear that ringing to this very day, the big jingle bells that they'd hung from the door that would announce to the staff that someone had walked in. I heard them and glanced over to see the most beautiful girl in the world walk in. Lex smiled. I love stories like this. I was transfixed. I mean, she lit up the whole room just walking in. My friends all stopped laughing when they saw my face and turned to see who it was I was looking at. And you know how you can feel someone watching you? Feel their eyes burning into you and you turn and see them? They can be watching you from a crowd, but you turn and look directly into their eyes? Well, I watched her feel the burn of my eyes and catch me looking at her. He smiled bashfully, remembering being caught. And she just smiled at us. She smiled that smile of someone who knows she's hot and doesn't resent it when men are stunned by her beauty. Didn't roll her eyes or anything like a lot of girls do, like they're insulted by the compliment. I wouldn't know, Lex said with a smirk. Well, she didn't. She just smiled and walked on, looking around for the people she was supposed to meet. And what did you do? Well, I let the guys make fun of me for a while, and they all went back to whatever we've been talking about that just wasn't important for me anymore. Saving the world from this terrorist or that crisis just faded away, and I knew from that moment that the only thing that mattered to me was her. Wow, what did she look like? An exquisite face, apricot skin, smoky almond eyes, wine red cupid's bow lips, long black hair and a French braid down to the small of her back. So, what did you do? Ha! It was funny. Well, no, it's funny now, but at the time I was dead serious. I started thinking about what I would have to do to get that girl. Save her from drowning, save her from a fire, save her from the white slavers who'd come to grab her in the night. As it turns out, the best thing to do was wait until I saw her again and go up to her and say hello. Really? No pickup line? No contrived situation? Nope, just an honest hello. Wow, and what's the lucky lady's name? Guy smiled the smile of a cat that got the canary. Mrs. Fox. Finally, the bartender flicked on the lights to tell everyone it was time to split. There were groans of protest, but he made a "what can I do" face and shrugged. Tabs were paid and hugs were given by people parting ways, goodbyes were spoken and luck wished. 5 evil men at the bar seemed to stiffen in readiness. Lex stretched and yawned like a leopard in the shade, and Guy thought again about giving him back the painting he had stolen, but changed his mind and decided to break into his room and leave it there while the artist slept. He just had to see which room was his. He had been sitting with one leg crossed, the ankle resting on his other knee, and he twisted the heel of his shoe to reveal several tiny gadgets set in sunken niches matching their shape. He wedged a finger into one of the niches to pop out a small round silver thing, something that looked like a watch battery. Using his knee to slide the heel back into place, he peeled off a plastic sticker that kept the adhesive clean on one side, and he palmed the tiny GPS tracker. When Lex stood up, Guy rose with him, and when the artist offered his hand to shake, Guy surprised him with a warm hug instead. The GPS tracker slid deftly under the collar of Lex's shiny purple shirt and stuck there. "Well," Lex said, "I wish you the best in everything you do, and I must say that Mrs. Fox is a very lucky lady." "Thank you. I wish you the best of luck with your opening, and I'm sure you'll get your painting back." "Ah!" Lex rolled his eyes theatrically, backing away. "My fingers are crossed. Good night, amiguito." Guy watched him leave and thought, what a nice fellow. Then he felt the burn of eyes upon him and glanced at a man at the bar who looked sharply away. It was a burly man in a long black leather coat with stubble on his strong, meaty jaw, the same length as the close-cropped hair on his head. He had looked away so quickly that it was obvious he had been watching intently, and Guy was instantly on guard. The 4 other men standing with stubble were birds of his feather, and they were all watching Lex walk out the door. Guy pulled out his smartphone and pretended to scroll through Facebook so the thugs wouldn't know he was already onto them. Quickly, he turned on the camera and tried to make as many surreptitious photos of them as he could, but they all came out blurry. He had to stop when Stubble glanced back at him and almost saw what he was doing. He turned and walked off to the gents, making sure they saw him go. "He was taking our picture," Stubble said to the others. "I'm sure of it." "We'll see about that," said another, leaving to follow Guy. "Maybe you should go with him, Trevor," Stubble said. "He looks a bit fit. Might tax old Danny boy, what with his bum leg." The one called Trevor sized Guy up and nodded. "He'll give Daniel a run for his money, he would. We'll be along in a jiffy. I think the 3 of you have that puff in the bag and don't need us to." "Right." Trevor followed Danny, following Guy into the bathroom, leaving the other 3 to follow Lex down the green-carpeted hall to the golden doors of the elevator, grabbing him halfway down and wrestling him sideways through a service entrance. When Danny pushed open the men's room door, Guy was nowhere to be seen, so the thug was instantly suspicious. His quarry was most likely hidden in a stall, crouched on the seat of a toilet and waiting to pounce on him, so he must already know that they already knew that he knew that they knew that he was onto their game. He paused, carefully looking behind the door to make sure Guy wasn't waiting to hit him from behind, because that's exactly what he would have done, and when he saw that no one was there, he proceeded cautiously, letting the door shut quietly behind him, passing right underneath Guy, who waited like a spider above the door in the corner where the wall met the ceiling. Guy's knees and elbows were shaking from the strain of pushing so hard to keep himself there, and it was a great relief to let go when the door was closed beneath him and out of his way. He pushed off hard with his legs as he dropped, and his prey turned just in time to see him and gasp as he crashed into him. They hit the cold tiles hard, the thug cushioning the fall a bit, but the impact still jarring Guy enough to stun him. Just in time for Trevor to walk in. Cursing, the newcomer sprang into action, tackling Guy. Rolling him over and sitting down hard on his chest so he couldn't block his punches or hit back, Trevor grabbed Guy's face to turn it and get a better target for his knuckles. In the movies, the hero always manages to rock his legs up and kick the bad guy in the back of the head, but Trevor knew that was physically impossible, so he wasn't worried. It was Hollywood. Guy also knew it was impossible, so he didn't bother trying it. Instead, he made a big fist out of both of his pinned hands and pressed it under Trevor's tailbone before he had a chance to strike. There was a cluster of nerves there that made the thug jump a little, giving Guy just enough room to twist and put his shoulder up, keeping Trevor a few inches above him for the split second he needed to slip out from under him. Trevor, outraged, swung blindly behind him and managed to hit Guy in the side of the head, and Guy lost his balance on the tiles. By now, Danny was struggling to get up. He'd slipped a disc in his spine, and it was uncomfortable, but he was not out of commission yet. Trevor scrambled to his feet and turned to aim a kick at Guy's face. Steeling himself, Guy rolled himself quickly towards Trevor, who, surprised, hesitated. While Guy could not possibly gather enough momentum to bowl Trevor over, like in the movies, it still started him and made him stagger a bit, off balance as he was from the kick he had yet to deliver. Much closer now, Guy reached around and swung, hitting the back of Trevor's knee from behind. It wasn't hard enough to knock him down, but still made him shiver reflexively and stagger more. Guy wrapped one arm around Trevor's leg and grabbed it with his other hand, squeezed, and his would-be assailant went down hard, crashing right on top of Danny. Guy got to his feet, still holding Trevor's leg wrapped in his arms, but he loosened his grip enough to back up a bit, to let his grip slide from the shin to the ankle, and there he made his grip tight again and leaned back, making Trevor scream. Letting go, he stepped in and kicked Danny full in the face as he tried to rise, full in the baleful glare of his hard gray eyes. He knew he should take that chance to make his getaway. Every second he stayed outside of his hotel room was one more chance to get caught, and held long enough for police to arrive and put together that he was a culprit in 2 thefts that day. If he had any chance to get away, he couldn't dilly-dally. He couldn't resist, though. These 2 had to be marked, if only to make them recognizable to the authorities later. Swiveling on his heel, Guy swung his arm and dropped to put all of his momentum into a punch that blackened both of Trevor's eyes. The force cracked the thug's head back into the cold tiles and knocked him out. Rolling to his feet, Guy turned on Danny and battered him black and blue with savage blows that could be heard from behind the bar. The bartender and the few remaining customers had all been staring at the men's room door with open mouths since they'd heard Trevor scream, and now watched the blonde wood with stricken eyes, frozen by the shock of it. A long moment passed, and then the door swung open, the man the bartender would incorrectly remember later as being French coming out. The door closed slowly behind him, obscuring the brief view they'd all had of 2 badly beaten men on the floor. They stared at his face, which he wrinkled up in anger at his stupidity in coming out that night, in taking a risk, and now being in danger because of it. They watched him all the way to the exit, and then were distracted by the horrible smell coming out of the men's room, a smell that made them gasp. One of Guy's inventions that had gotten him noticed by the CIA recruiting officer back in university had been a new method of tracking down criminals. For some time, banks have had decoy sacks of money in the teller's drawer with dye packs in them, little bombs of bright red dye that would explode all over a bank robber after he left the building. The idea was that a bright red man is easier to find fleeing the scene of a crime. Guy thought, however, that a bright red man can still hide behind a tree or in some bushes or catch a ride from someone driving by. A lonely woman or a confused young man might pull over to help a bright red fellow who just robbed a bank because it would offer adventure and excitement to spice up their lives. If that dye pack was full of skunk spray, however, nobody in the world would let them in their car. No cop would roll right past a tree with his quarry hiding behind it, and if he tried to get lost in a crowd, that crowd would part like the Red Sea and leave him like a sitting duck for the pursuing officers. Guy's skunk pack won him instant notoriety on campus, a small fortune in selling the idea to security companies, and the attention of a CIA recruiter. Now, a smaller version of it, taking from the sliding heel of his other shoe, was making the 2 thugs in the men's easier for the authorities to find. Everyone they passed when they staggered to their hideout would remark on their stench and remember it, and probably gossip about it, and be happy to tell the police what the men looked like when they follow up on the anonymous tip Guy planned to give later on. He was sure those goons had come to do some kind of harm to Lex, and they were probably had him in their clutches in a dank, dark cell somewhere already. He was now glad he'd pasted GPS on him earlier. He would be able to locate the hideout if police could not track down the 2 stinky men, but he really didn't want to get involved, since he had not only the police looking for him, but the henchmen of the dreaded Count Rupert of Hensau. It's just, he liked the artist. Lex was a nice guy, and he was responsible for him being in this situation. So he had to find and rescue him, and that would take time. Excuse me. Speaking of the dreaded Count Rupert of Hentzau, at that very moment, his private jet was touching down at the Zenda International Airport. A long black jet with an especially dastardly-looking crimson H emblazoned on it. Without waiting for the seatbelt light to go off or the tone to go ding, 12 evil men rose ominously from their seats. The first one in the first seat moved with the sinuous grace of a panther. His head was shaven except for a long, braided black scalp lock, and there was cruelty in the thin lips framed on his Fu Manchu mustache. He, like the 11 dreadnoughts that followed him, was heavily tattooed and wore many weapons in discreet hiding places all over his body, from knives and ninja throwing stars to pistols that sprang with a snick out of their sleeves into ready hands. They were the demons that Hentzau kept on a leash, and he was Zaporavo, their captain. It was said that he could track a bird on a cloudy day, and he'd been trained by blind monks in a temple carved out of the living rock of an active volcano, in a jungle where even monsters feared to tread. In martial arts there was no equal in all the world, because no one who'd ever challenged him had survived. The flight attendant, a pretty French woman named Odile, smiled pleasantly at him as he passed, and said bonne nuit to all of the others, one after the other, until they were out of the jet and hopefully out of her life forever. She crossed herself and rolled her eyes, letting out a heavy sigh. Mon Dieu,